to be here. Oh, a warning has come on. We are now officially on the record. Okay. All right. So yeah, it's so awesome to be here. We have long talked about this, and I the idea is that we're posing ourselves a question to discuss about a flourishing life. And we really sort of liked the idea that we have this scripted to a certain point, and then it's unscripted, meaning Chris doesn't know what I'm going to say. I don't know what he was going to say. We have a poll or two. We really, really, really would love to see if we can get comments, questions. Our goal is to leave enough time to like legitimately connect and talk about this. And we just feel super flattered to be here.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing we wanted to do is just go through and give a little bit about each of us. So quickly, just on the background, I always like to preface conversations when I have conversations with Sarah by saying I am not a psychologist. I say that for a very important reason. My job at Exos is the Senior Director of Applied Neuroscience. And I say that it means a ton of different things, but primarily I say it because it points to the fact that Sarah and I come at these very interesting and complex topics like flourishing or leadership or performance through very, very different schools of thought. And we look at them through different lenses, but that's really important because these are really complex ideas. And I think the more different lenses we can have, the better that serves us ultimately. But this was my initial lens. This was a look at what my first part of my career looked like. So I spent 25 years now in the academic world, standing up in front of a classroom full of students, talking about specifically the science of human learning, how we get from where we are to where we want to be. What does that look like inside the brain and body when that process happens? What does it look like to the observer when we watch it happen in others? And then what can we do to kind of optimize the process so that maybe we can get from where we are to where we want to be a little bit more quickly? So that's where I started. I'm still doing a lot of this, but frankly, at some point, thankfully for me, gratefully, in my way of looking at the world, I stepped out of the classroom and I started working with people who have really, really a lot of skin in the game when it comes to getting better faster and trying to progress and do so and call on skills when the moment calls for it, and specifically some really scary environments. So I work, as an example, with a group of professional Olympic snowboarders. And, this is a picture I took back in December in the dark up in Finland, with these people who are literally staring down the barrel of a 75-foot gap jump with real life and limb on the line. And how is it that we can help these people not only show up with the skills that they need to be able to do these death-defying things, but also how they can do it in a way so that the likelihood of success goes up. So how do they manage themselves in those moments? So that's a little bit about me. Sarah, how about you?
Okay, I'm going to name this tune even in even shorter notes. I am very glad you came out of the academic environment because against incredible odds, our world collided in the most interesting of ways. So I started out on the opposite side of flourishing. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I spent 22, 23 years with a thriving private practice. I even still have a very, very tiny boutique practice. But really nobody found their way to me when they felt well. Everybody came to me, found my doorstep when kind of the proverbial wheels were coming off the bus. And I would say for about maybe a decade and a half, I had a private practice that was just filled with C-suite executives, and all of them had sort of fallen apart under the pressure of what was going on in their lives. And I just can't tell you how difficult it is to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so about 10 years ago, it dawned on me one day, what if we don't wait until the system is broken? And this really changed everything for my whole life. So next slide, Chris.
This one?
Yeah, Do you have the Jane Goodall one, the next
Yeah,
one?
yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
it.
Okay. So this changed everything in my life, and I changed my whole relationship, the way that I saw my private practice. I really began to view my private practice like a living, breathing experiment. And I approached it with this lens of observation, wonder, and relentless curiosity. I really gave up the pursuit of like pathology and diagnosis, all the kind of formal things that had been the hallmark feature of being um, in the very meaningful trenches of being a clinical psychologist. I just kind of came to this epiphany. I was like, I've been doing this now for close to 15 years, and I had never had a class on um, happiness or well-being or anything on the sort of healthy spectrum of things. So I just broke free. I started creating this living laboratory. And with that, this is where my life with Chris really collided. And we began to collaborate.
Yeah, and so that story, both of our stories ended up with where we are today, which is at this wonderful company called Exos, and we get to spend time dabbling in this world of flourishing, even though we use other names to describe this concept. What we get to do largely is collaborate again through these different lenses that we see topics like flourishing on real strategies for how people can show up feeling better and performing better on a more predictable schedule, right? And so we get to be with, 25% of the Fortune 100, and these are the topics and the discussions that we get to have. And it's really exciting because we're really involved in the business of finding solutions to dealing with a lot of what people are facing today, which is certainly not all flourishing, Sarah.
Yeah, it's been, my role at Exos is the senior director of performance psychology, and Chris and I work with this just great team of people where we have all this runway to ask all kinds of new questions, right? So this is the part where I like to define what flourishing is. Chris always says I have a beef with flourishing. Um, and I don't know that I have a beef with flourishing, but I do like to get clear about like sort of how I frame flourishing, because I often saw in my private practice that people thought flourish, like having a life that was flourishing, was like this destination. And so I always like to be incredibly straightforward about what we're shooting for, right? So flourishing is not a destination. You have to love it loosely. And I'm always cautious around language that might sound like it's almost sort of rigged against our nature. And the shrink in me has to say that there's a side of our nature that cannot always be flourishing. So, okay, that's my warning. But here we gave ourselves a thought question. Chris, you want to tackle the thought question?
Sure. Yeah. So what we did, and this is where we're going to start to get a little bit off the script. So we gave ourselves a
Mhm.
mission to bravely explore the ingredients of a flourishing life. So that was our mission, this topic of the ingredients. So what are these ingredients? What can we do to promote more flourishing in our life? And again, Sarah and I look at these things a little bit different. So what you're going to see here are different perspectives coming to bear. So I've got a few ingredients. Sarah's got a few ingredients. And the thing that we're going to do is come at this through our unique perspectives. But that's what we're going to do. Try to pinpoint some of these ingredients so that we might be able to use these ingredients and maybe start to build more flourishing in our life.
And I am predicting, we're going to do a quick poll, but I am predicting that our answers are quite different from each other. Do you want to weigh in on this?
I think naturally they are. I think because, again, our training is different and our worldviews are different. But the thing I love about working with you, Sarah, is that we always find some crossover in our Venn diagrams of how we see both problems and solutions. And so I'm really excited just to see where this goes.
Why have I never been so complimented in my life to be compared to a Venn diagram? Yes. Okay. So should we start with the
Let's
poll?
start.
Okay,
Yes.
let's start. All right. So this is yeah, we're gonna now take our very first poll. And I think we do John.
So, well,
John,
do you want individual questions like this, or do you want me to launch all three questions at the same time?
we'll just do one at a time.
All right,
One at a
cool.
time as they show up in the deck. You are the best. Okay, so how much are you willing to suffer for your flourishing? Okay, let's see. We're answering it too, Chris, right?
Oh, good.
Yeah, it looks like I'm the only person who can't answer it.
Oh, that's awful. I feel horrible given one of my ingredients coming up, but that's awful. Okay. Okay, so did we get the responses?
Yeah, we're 91% complete. I can end the poll
Okay.
now.
No. Let's see how many are willing
We
to
got
participate.
4 more participants left. We've got 41
Okay.
out of 45 so far. 42 out of
I like
45,
the
43 out of
predictions.
45, 2 left. Might be you two. I don't know.
No, I put
Answer.
mine in. I
All right.
answered. Okay.
I'm going to count down
it's-
3, 2, 1. Okay, we've got 95% of participants complete. Here we go. Can you all see that? I'm going to share the results. Hang on. There we go. Can you see that now?
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah, we see that now.
It's all anonymous, by the way, everyone. It's all anonymous,
Yes,
this stuff.
Of course.
I should have said that to begin
That's what they all say. Okay, this is great. We just like polls because they're fun and we try to be cheeky in them, quite frankly. There is no right or wrong answer. We'll tell you that secret right off the top.
I love already, though, a look at some people being very honest. I've suffered it quite enough. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, there is a time to always sort of tap out from the suffering.
But not
department.
surprisingly, giving our audience here that, we've got sort of 80%-ish in the I'm game for a fight and bring on the suffering in service of flourishing.
I knew you would anchor us in the data, Chris. Always.
All right.
Always.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna get to the he said, she said part of this. That's how we're gonna run this. But before we start, this is sort of now officially the time we are both off script. I am no longer complicit in anything that comes out of Chris's mouth. I'd like to say that. I know I already saw that it was recorded. Chris, would you like to indemnify yourself from me? I suggest you do as a friend.
I'm going to stand by you. I'm going to
Okay.
stand by anything you have to say. I got your back here, now, and always. All right. So me first, right?
Yes, you first.
Okay.
Reveal your first.
Okay. Before I do, I just want to quickly remind folks that I am not a psychologist, and I'm coming at this from the lens of applied neuroscience. Okay. So what I'm going to be talking about, the things I came up with 2 ingredients that fall under one broad category, which is how to think about getting your brain and body system in good enough shape so that flourishing has any chance whatsoever of showing up. So I'm going into the biological foundations piece of this. And so my first ingredient of finding more flourishing in your life might sound boring, but it is the conversation around sleep. And I don't know how much people that are really focused on this idea of flourishing think about this, but yes, this is the most obvious thing, but I just want to be clear on why maybe it's so obvious. So here's my value proposition for sleep as it pertains to the subject of flourishing. First thing to know, if you are even moderately underslept, okay? If you're even moderately underslept, here's the thing that happens inside your brain. 2 really important things happen. First of all, know this. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that does a lot of the decision making and where willpower shows up, all these executive functions, becomes less active, okay? However, the limbic part of your brain, the emotional part of your brain, becomes hyperactive. And so what you get as a net of that is heightened emotions with less filter. Does anybody experience this? This is only from being underslept, of course, right? I mean, this is the thing. Thank you for those who put up their hand. You get sort of a bad 2-for-1 here, right? The emotions start to be a little bit closer to the surface, and then the prefrontal cortex, which normally comes in to save us, starts to be less active. And so we show up less self-aware and less able to regulate ourselves in those moments. Difficult to find flourishing in those moments, correct? The other thing to know here, by the way, is that when it's not just about how much sleep you get, the types of sleep, the quality of sleep you get underneath that really, really matter too. And the one I just want to quickly point out is as it pertains to this conversation, is the idea of REM sleep, the rapid eye movement part of the sleep architecture. If you're not, because you can get a great night's sleep, but still be deficient in these certain types of sleep, which really, really matters. We'll get into that later, perhaps. But here's the thing to know. If you are not getting enough quality REM sleep, something really important is going to be missing. REM sleep specifically, one of its main contributions to this idea of flourishing is that when we're in REM sleep, we get to process the previous day's emotionally charged data, right? Something happens, something stressful, anxiety producing happens in the day. We go to sleep at night and that information gets processed. And the way they do this research, if you're curious, is they'll put people in a sleep lab and show them a bunch of crazy, like, disturbing pictures or videos. And then they'll say, okay, go to sleep now. And when your brain flips over into REM sleep, they'll nudge you a little bit so that you don't get your REM sleep. You don't even have to be awakened from it. But you're going through a night of getting, say, 8 hours of sleep, but no REM sleep. Then in the morning, they wake you up and say, hey, how disturbing on a scale of 1 to 10 would you rate those pictures I showed you last night? And the group that didn't get REM sleep predictably and significantly rates them as more triggering, for lack of a better word, right? It's the ability to park what happened yesterday. So if you think about these two things together, right? We're less emotional. We have more sort of executive oversight of how we're thinking and showing up. And we're not dragging forward enough or so much of the things from yesterday. Sarah, do you have a thought about sleep that you could now chime in on?
Okay, so I don't know that I would have predicted that you said sleep, but it is on brand because you fight for sleep getting airwave, even though people are reluctant to radically shift the way that they sleep, right? So this is very on brand for you. And I completely agree with you. Anybody who, I'm going to be much quicker than you and much more street scientist than real scientist, okay? Anybody who has ever had a child or cared for a child through at least more than 24 hours, where you, and I define child as 0 to 7, and they miss nap, and maybe they even stay up too late, and they wake up and it's immediately evident to the, yeah, exactly, looking at you, Brent. It's immediately evident to you upon the child's rising that they already have diminished coping resources, and that the cure-all would be a good night's sleep. So you have me fully. Also, you had me because as the resident shrink, you had me at REM sleep, because this is also where our brain has this amazing capacity to dream. And it is, inside of sleep. We have to have healthy sleep in order to dream. And dreaming is a very important component of how we psychologically process both past and future events, and sort of prepares us for the present. So you had me at hello.
Yeah,
and
I love it.
Fully buy into sleep.
I love that you brought up the child analogy, because it is. I have kids. they're getting a little bit older, but they still are at that point where you can very visibly see the effect of not great amounts of sleep or poor quality of sleep. And yes, that is exactly the way I feel. It's just that, our frontal lobes are a little bit better at catching us more often the older we get, but let's not kid ourselves. The effects are still hiding beneath the surface. This actually is where I want to quickly grab a pulse on the room too. This is our second poll. So John, if you can have this one queued up, I just want to get a quick sense of how people are thinking. My relationship with sleep, how would you describe it? 9 hours being non-negotiable? I'll take what I can get. Proud member of the 5 a.m. club? Or I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Okay, we're at 95%. So let's go 3,
Let's have a look.
2, 1.
Wow, we've got some people pretty
But-
dedicated to 9 hours. That's impressive.
That
really
is impressive. But equally on brand with national statistics is I'll take what I can get. And some of that look is unavoidable, all of which we're going to get to.
Yeah, and if you're in the 5 a.m. club, I always say that there's nothing wrong with getting up early. It's a lot that
I'm
can
in
be
the
done
5
early in the
a.m.
day.
club. So
Yeah.
I love me and that 7%. Welcome. Now I do go to bed like I'm an infant, so that's fine too. Also.
That's the catch. You have to be committed to early to bed. That's great. Thanks, folks. That's awesome. All right, Sarah, I think we're into one of yours, correct?
Okay, so this will not surprise anybody. We did bring a shrink to the party. Okay, so one of the ingredients I find constantly is this sense of belonging. And just like Chris clarified where he's kind of talking from, I'm talking really as a psychologist here. So I'm talking just about the human psychology of belonging, and we need belonging to survive. It's a necessary part of being human. And Chris, I have much less science to say on any of this. But I will say that in all the people that I've worked with and partnered with in teams, and all of the runway that we have inside of Exos to play with this concept, this is true. And this is, I want to be sort of clear what I mean. I mean this psychological human need to belong. Also, you don't have to be born to your belonging. You don't have to have deep belonging in every area of your life, but you do have to have a sense of belonging. And also, I would say that belonging extends, or maybe even starts with, a sense of belonging to yourself, and then the capacity to belong inside of a pack for with others. So the story I wanted to share here was, I don't know if anybody out there, you can put it in chat. Does anybody watch the reality show called Alone? It's a survival show. Chris, do you watch Alone?
I sure do. I love it.
Okay. So there's two things that take people out. Okay. And in this order, it is loneliness, or a sense of being too detached from the people and the relationships that matter in their life. And then starvation. And even with starvation, most people will starve themselves to win, but medical staff pulls them out. So those are the two reasons. So that to me is a remarkable statement about how powerful and potent and what a driver it is to have a sense of belonging. What I am purposely avoiding is any discussion, any academic discussion at all about what belonging means. I'm staying completely just at the human level. We are pack animals. for evolutionary reasons and for psychological reasons. We do better emotionally and psychologically when we have a sense of connectedness. Chris, is
Yeah,
is
I
this a
love this one.
shocker to you?
Not at all. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, no surprise. It is something we talk a lot about. I'm glad you brought this one in because, and I like the angle you took to it, but it really has to do with us as a person, how we feel at a moment. And it is a very difficult thing to manage, as you said. Like I find it amazing when I watch that show, and very seldom does I can't think off the top of my head anyone who has tapped out just from being hungry. I've seen people get pulled out, like you said, for losing too much weight, but it's that feeling of that they're not socially
Connected.
engaged with the people that they want to be. And I also think that it's interesting that you brought this one up too, because it speaks not only to how you're feeling, but it also speaks a lot to this idea of team dynamics. It is an enormous topic, but I think it's a really interesting idea that not only is this flourishing something that happens with us as an N of one, but when you put this concept and you bring it to life within teams in an effective way, you really start to see teams thriving, which is a
And you see
really cool
flow.
and different, sure, flow
Yes.
flourishing. We get group flourishing happening. So I think that's a
Yes.
really great one. I'm glad you pulled that one in.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Carrying right on then, we're going to move into my second one. Oh, wait, that's not it. There it is. There's my delicious plate of kimchi. My second ingredient in a flourishing life have to do with things for your gut. All right. So this is the conversation around gut health and the gut microbiome. Sarah, I apologize. I'm going to nerd out just a tiny wee bit on this stuff.
It's one of my favorite features of you. Why
Yeah,
I hitched my wagon.
you know, there's there's a million reasons to think about having a healthy colony of bacteria lining your gut, the thing we call the microbiome. It's getting a lot of attention these days. If you're paying attention to podcasting or social media, this is a big topic, and it matters for a whole bunch of reasons. Like, it's really, having good gut health is really important for immunity. It's really important to keep inflammation markers down. But the reason I want to focus on it here is because of this all important thing called the gut-brain axis. There's this amazing communication network that happens between your gut, and specifically the bacteria in your gut, and on your brain, hence your mind and your mood and your ability to feel like you can flourish. Now, just quickly, if you want to know how this works, the way that your gut and brain communicate, there's two ways that it happens. One is a direct route, which is directly through the vagus nerve. You have a very broad band communication line between the gut and the bacteria in your gut and areas of the brain that are very much responsible for mood and cognitive function and other things related to flourishing, right? But then there's this other sort of indirect route where the gut communicates to the brain, which is this. Get this, the gut bacteria produce 90% of the serotonin in your system and 50% of the dopamine that your brain and body use. They can release these chemicals right into the bloodstream, which crosses over the blood-brain barrier and has a tremendous effect on how you're showing up in the world. Serotonin, if you don't know much about serotonin, I've heard it called a here and now chemical. It makes us feel good about what is happening in the here and now. It's a calming chemical to some degree. It's not only that, but it lets us feel like everything that's happening right now is okay. And dopamine is this other chemical that really drives motivation and reward. So if you feel like you're flat, not happy with where you are, but not interested in going out and engaging in the world in a different place, it largely has to do with these chemicals. And so this all important communication stream between the gut and the brain is so very important for how you're showing up and how you're feeling in the world. And this is the picture of kimchi here for a reason. One of the things that you can do, we're not really in the business of too much advice giving here, but fermented foods daily have a really strong, positive, and consequential impact on the diversity and the health of your gut's microbiome And therefore, that direct line of communication to the brain is real and highly consequential.
Okay, this is exactly the direction I thought you would take it, although I wouldn't have anticipated this, but I knew we were going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. I love this. I love this for a couple of reasons. First of all, I have a whole side obsession on like health psychology and the intimate role between your gut microbiome and the vagus nerve. And for me, the way I was introduced to it was when you work inside clinical psychology, 80% of what comes through your door in and out is either anxiety or depression or a combo of both. And so the vagus nerve and learning about how breath and food and all the things interfere and all of that is sort of, you eventually get there because there's only so many solutions that seem effective. So this is, I think this is awesome and totally true. And I am definitely not in this market in the advice giving, but I will say this. Everybody that I've worked with who finds their way to have like moments in life that are punctuated with flourishing, I will say inside of my practice, they are often working with like physicians to correct kind of long held, what they thought were disconnected, like gut issues. And come to find out that under the hood, it typically has some sort of connected root system. And this is often a place to start that tells a lot of tales.
This is one of those places, by the way, Sarah, when we talk about where we're going to see some crossover in our Venn diagrams of how we think about mental performance, for lack of a better term, right? This is why you and I see eye to eye on so many of these things, because seeing food and gut health as not only an intervention for some of the ailments of mental health, but also as an ingredient in a thriving, flourishing life. Seeing psychology not only as a top-down process, but oftentimes can be a bottom-up process that we can lean into and help really drive some of the changes we're looking for.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We're going to do the last two. And Chris, unbeknownst to you, I took a bonus ingredient. I know the task was to
little greedy.
Little greedy, but I've actually been accused of worse. So that's actually generous of you. And so I took a bonus ingredient because I can't answer this tune in just in one more note. Okay, so mine is people have learned how to have a relationship with discomfort, and not just for discomfort's purpose. But I know that it can sort of seem counterintuitive that tolerating discomfort and flourishing are kind of reliant on each other. But from my vantage point, from all the partners that we partner with, they are connected. And we really can't spend our energy wishing that our suffering wasn't present and sort of waiting to flourish. In my years inside the clinical setting, I saw, the wreckage of what happens when we really just can't tolerate discomfort. And it's actually the opposite happens toward flourishing. We start to sort of live in a cage of our own making. So I think it is possible that flourishing and suffering are border towns. They're not opposites. Chris, weigh in on this.
Well, I think it's cool that you brought this one up, because at the beginning of this, I pointed out that my original academic interest is in this idea of learning. And this is where it crosses over with me, because without creating some initial agitation points in the system, learning just doesn't happen at a rate with which you really want to see it happen. And so the idea that being comfortable in discomfort as a driver for learning, by the way, for change, synonyms here, that is a really interesting idea that I don't think gets enough. I mean, you hear a lot about people, talking about getting outside of your comfort zone and all the rest of it, but it doesn't have to be really extreme. You just have to, I think, knowing that at the front end of all of these kinds of experiences, there's going to be some discomfort and agitation, but that's the signal that you're looking for. Of course, there's a sweet spot here, right? Like there's a tipping point where too much can be not great either, correct?
Yeah, too much can be overwhelm, too little, right? Then we sort of cease to. But I do think that when you say it doesn't even have to, you don't have to run a 600-mile race. You don't have to, whatever your worst fear is, you don't have to face that. But it is the challenge that you learn how to kind of hold your center, even inside of discomfort. And everybody I've worked with who, again, has these moments of flourishing, because we already had the disclaimer with my beef, that just like love and all the kind of things in life like this, like you cannot hang on to it too tightly, right? And I find that people who keep narrowing their aperture of focus in order to make themselves more and more comfortable instead of learning how to tolerate discomfort, they actually get further and further away from flourishing. It's counterproductive.
Yeah, it's a gateway in so many ways. I know Stephen Kotler was one of the speakers here, and he might think of this as sort of that struggle, right? You got to push through the struggle.
That's right.
Flows on the other side of this. So I think these concepts are all very much related.
Yeah, they're intermingled. Okay, we're going to bring this home. Okay, the last one that I had to sneak in. I really would lose my my card as a psychologist if I didn't. So is curiosity. Like I find that people who can really lean in, especially when you don't want to, or you think you're right, or your back's against the wall, like when you can really lean in and be like, "Ooh, tell me more," and mean it, and approach life with this lens of curiosity, it's like bulletproof. And the people who I've worked with who have the most moments that are punctuated by flourishing, since we know this can't be a destination, they have this. And the other great sort of tale from the trenches with people is that it's practice. Nobody's born into this. It's tied to your capacity to harness this ability for self-awareness and self-regulation in the service of curiosity. This is baked into like all of our programming. We're, we are essentially just leveraging what self-awareness and self-regulation can, how it can help transform us, right? And so the most flourishing people I know use this as a rocket fuel. And this is another thing I would say about curiosity, is that you can't chase it, right? Like you can't chase what I found. You can't chase curiosity. You have to actually eliminate the things that are getting in the way of it, right? So people are like, well, how do I stay curious? It's like, well, be really mindful about what's keeping you busy, what's preventing you from being even bored. Boredom is important inside of curiosity. Oh, here's one. Chris mentioned sleep, right? Curiosity is super expensive neurochemically. So it's the first thing that's cut from our kind of list of neuroefficiency exchanges when our body is depleted. So I would say a key ingredient, I barely would call this bonus. It's a necessary ingredient, is that, just don't let life kill your curiosity, basically.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you're right. It's not a bonus. I think of curiosity almost as the original mental performance skill. Like without it,
so good.
What do you have, right? And you talked about how this changes over the course of a life. When you're a kid, think of your kids. What is the question you hear from every 4-year-old incessantly? Why? It is the software that they run to change the hardware of their brain, right? It drives the change, right? And then, but we get like into our mid-20s and all those things start to shut down. And along with it, a lot of times goes curiosity. We get locked in. We stop being curious about kind of music we like or what kind of foods we like to eat. No, we've got our programs. We're going to run those and we shut it down. Doesn't mean it's gone forever. It means that it has to be cultivated. It has to be worked on. It has to be intentional. You got to create time for it, like you said. But, you know, if you can get that piece going, especially into adulthood, which is where everybody here, I believe, except for Brent's little sidekick there, is at, this, learn from what kids do. It is the driver of change. It is the driver of, I don't know, it's not too many steps. Yeah.
Well, let me chime in here. It's also, curiosity is, for psychologists, we think about it in lots of different ways. At times it's developmentally, it's always should be present, or it's best if it's present. But there are certain times developmentally where the absence of curiosity is sometimes diagnostic. So there's lots of ways that we look at curiosity, but one of the ways in my work now, and certainly with you, Chris, is we're always trying to think, how do we help people access internal sources of motivation? And curiosity is rocket fuel for intrinsic motivation. Yeah. I was bored a few years ago, and really this sort of whole detour occurred because of some boredom. And I remember making a commitment to curiosity. I was like, I'm going to double down on it as my thing, that like, that's what I have lock, stock, and barrel. And it makes a huge difference to make it be intentional. And again, I'm always trying to have people see that none of this has to be lofty. If you can carve out 15 minutes a week where you are intentionally being curious, I got my own kind of things that I think are great to do in this, and anybody can contact each Chris and I privately about that. You know, 1%, and you just catch a little bit of momentum's blind side with curiosity, and you're off to the races. So I'm so glad you like my bonus ingredient, because I was prepared to apologize later, but now I don't even need to.
We might have saved the best for last, actually.
Okay.
Oh, you snuck another poll in here too.
I did sneak another poll. This is just gratuitous, and what we really want to do is get to the Q&A. And how is it best that we do this, John? Is it best that sort of you navigate it, or can people go off speaker?
Let me just finish setting up this poll. I just made a slight mistake with it, but it's coming right now. Here we go.
My relationship with curiosity is best described as, my friends call me Curious George. Okay. I'd rather ask questions than answer them. Okay. So curiosity, I will if I have to. I know all I need to know. Thank you very much. Perfect.
I have logged my answer.
Me too. Dr. Penny, we need a number 5. What is it, Penny? What would 5 be?
Because P.S. that's you.
Yeah, you're gonna reveal yourself here.
Yeah, exactly.
My name isn't George. Fair.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
We're still only at 88%, 90% now. Okay, let's go 3, 2, 1. Here are the results.
Well, I mean, look at this. 0 are, I know, which doesn't surprise me, because you wouldn't be on this call. We curated those people right out. Okay. I deeply relate to these responses. I'd rather ask questions than answer them.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I think, does that get us to the point where we were going to say thank you and ask for questions? I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got, how much time we got left? John, keep us on point here.
You've got up to 12 minutes left.
All right. Should we go full screen and?
Yep, go for it. And our first question is from Nicoletta Acatrini. When you ask a question, please unmute your mic if you are able to do so at the moment, and introduce yourself. Nicoletta, excuse me, after you.
It's okay. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Gruyere, Switzerland. It's 10 p.m. here. I am a behavioral economist and a theologian, and I did my PhD on interesting and excessive motivation at work. but mostly I'm living here near a monastery where we practice almost everything we discussed here. Like everything is related to control, not control, I would say, to become aware of our food, our sleep, our feeling of belonging by doing exactly the opposite. So this is what I would like to ask you, because in fact, everything I heard, it's absolutely right, and it's fully described and practiced in several spiritual traditions. But to do that, in fact, and I just heard a presentation of a nun living in somewhere in hermetic lifestyle. You kind of need to go, and I think Sarah, she mentioned that at a certain point, I committed myself to do that, you know. So you kind of need that power at a certain point to go, not against you, but to overcome the resistance. I would say this is it. We have an inertia. Sorry, we have an inner inertia, a psychic inertia, and in order to get out and kind of muscle our psyche of all these strengths that you presented for these 5 and 6 ingredients, I think the common ground of all this, it's this ability and this skill which we can train. Again, it's not like a given, we can train to go a little bit against us. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to that, because the resistance, I agree with you. I don't know if it's against us, but it's something, and there is resistance. And I do believe that that's probably why the presence of tolerate discomfort felt to me like it needed to be there as well. It's in that partnership with like a kind of resisting what our regression to the mean is, whatever is sort of our unconscious habits and patterns. So I really appreciate you highlighting that. It feels frictiony. We don't just go skipping toward flourishing. And I really jive deeply with that, like non-rose colored glasses. For me, there's something very honest and liberating about setting my expectations clear.
Yeah, I think I'll chip in one last bit. I was going to go to the tolerating discomfort ingredient too, but I would also layer in the curiosity piece, because for me personally, and some of when you work with the kind of athletes that I work with, sometimes where there is a lot of discomfort when they're doing big and scary things, one of the antidotes to that discomfort is curiosity. Just noticing that it's happening. I think, Nicoletta, to your point, the idea that we can notice that we're in this state of discomfort,
Yeah.
and then just shine curiosity on it instead of fear, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it can actually counteract some of the, that feeling that we get when we are in the middle of discomfort. So great question.
The feeling like we're going to puke. And
Yeah.
I would say too, one other word that you had noted, and you even sort of stumbled over it yourself, you said control, and then you sort of backed off from it.
Yes.
I love, it's not control. It's actually surrender. But I do love that you stumbled over it, because you get to see the regression to the mean inside of ourselves. It's just a habit to say control. You mean influence, you mean surrender. It takes intentionality, which means really stumbling over that. So I think it's just a beautiful display of how humans work and the process that we go through in this control, surrender continuum, that I think is kind of the great quest that flourishing is often dependent upon.
And it leads to what you said. Yeah, and you pronounce a word which I really would like that everyone reminds, because the consequences of all this, it's liberation. That's exactly that. You said it, and I think I really think it pays off to highlight this is the result. And flourishing, in fact, it's experiencing that liberation. And by the way, the word ascetics comes from the Greek askesis, which means exercising. It's from the athletes, from the old Olympians. It's from the old Olympians, and that's why we call the ascetic spiritual program, it comes from exercise.
Yeah,
That's it.
absolutely. Thank you
I love
very
it.
much. Thank you very much for sharing, Nicoletta. That point. Okay, we got our queue of questions here. Next up, Sandy Palerano.
Yes.
You are on the floor. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. Sandy Palerano. I am the director of a well-being program at a small liberal arts college in the Midwest in the States, and wrapping up graduating with a master's in happiness studies with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar in about 2 months. So my question, thank you. My question has to do around bridging the knowing doing gap. Because, I'm thinking about my Gen Z students who are inundated with information, oftentimes conflicting information, but once they finally find information that they can trust, and that, is evidence-based and whatnot, actually applying it in their life is a whole other story. And so what can be done rather than just coaching them one-on-one to kind of get them incrementally applying these things in their life? Have you found things that work? What are the ingredients for bridging the knowing doing gap on a large scale basis?
Yeah, it's a really important question because, yeah, knowing is power for sure, but it's sort of like the so what versus the now what conversation. So I think the first barrier, as you point out, in a world where we're just inundated with a lot of conflicting information, to put it nicely, there's a lot of bad information. So being a resource to help people sift through what seem like contradictory messages everywhere, like getting grounded in what does the evidence really say and getting clear about that. I think that's a great first step. And I'm glad to hear that your college has got somebody like you doing things like this for students. I think it's really important and powerful. And then I think obviously the next step is, okay, so if I know that something like gut health is really useful for me in all the ways that it's useful for me, what can I do? Right? Is this about taking probiotics, or could it be about just thinking about what you're putting into your body in terms of like getting some fermented foods and understanding what that is and what it's not? It's like giving people action steps that are easy, affordable, readily available. I think that's the piece of it. It's having the now what's closely behind the so what.
I'm
Sarah,
going
what
to
do
take
you think?
yeah, I'm going to take a crack at this too, because you still remain, I think it's awesome. You're right. Right. But I also, there's this very real reality of when you are in the actual trenches with humans. It's like the famous Mike Tyson quote. Let's hope he said it because he gets attributed to it all the time. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. You're like in sessions with people, and present company included, like I am baffling to myself. I have all the information on planet Earth available to me, and I still elude myself constantly, day in and day out. So I want to relate much more as just someone in the trenches with humans, because I am living the same experiment that I've based this incredibly meaningful career on. I'm both a subject and a researcher in this. So I would say this, there's a couple of things that have worked for me, and I'm 49, my 31-year-old self is puking in the corner, but that's okay, because I'm going to start with compassion. I'm going to start with self-compassion. If you could have people practice, well, first of all, we have to check our own codependence. You can't do anything for them, truthfully. You can bear witness, you can 100% listen, you can come with the purest of space for them. By the way, you can root for them when they stop rooting for themselves. These are things you can do, but you can never change them. And the moment we disentangle ourselves from that delusion, we're also halfway there. But then I would say, we have this incredible capacity for self-compassion. And I would say the earlier we teach people about this capacity and this practice and this mechanism, you come back every day to it, because you aren't going to apply it perfectly. And life is going to kick your ass and you aren't going to know what to do, and you're going to make 1,000 mistakes. And then you return the next day. And I think the more we get sort of brutally honest about that process as well, my experience has been that people detect truthfulness. They feel it more than they know it. And they definitely know the absence of it. So I don't know. I've been at this a long time. I've never convinced anybody of anything, and I've never helped. I mean, I might be helpful in the sidecar, but it's all them. So compassion, 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 and then each day wake up, return to the practice of being human.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I do personally have experienced the power of self-compassion, Kristen Neff's work and Fred Luskin. I would say that's the number one thing. If I had to point to one thing that cured me from 14 years of depression, and I shout that from the rooftops everywhere I go. So yeah, I do have talks on it, and I let students know when I speak to them.
And that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also the thing to know is you're doing what you can. And the thing is you, the first time I heard anybody talk about compassion, I was a sophomore in undergrad where I went in Washington, D.C. It didn't make a lick of sense to me till I was 37.
Mm-hmm.
But the seed got planted and then things blossom down the road. Right. So just, keep up the good work, keep up the honest work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandy. Right. We're past time, but we have a row of questions. Chris and Sarah, totally understand if you need to jet. Are you happy to take more questions, or you got to go?
I have some time for...
I've got a few minutes. Let's take a
few minutes.
Let's take
a
couple more.
So, okay, Philip Lynn, you're up next.
Yes, thank you. I had to unmute. So I'm curious about your thoughts and experience in the area of spirituality. And let me explain what I mean by that. I've been reading a book about the teachings of St. Paul. And he is basically, one of the things that he's saying is that on our own, using our own ego and our own willpower, we cannot enter into a true state of love and well-being. That the way to enter into that is by cultivating an intimate relationship with God, with our Creator, with the force that created the universe, however people feel comfortable thinking about it. That when you tap into that, it opens another stream of energy and spirit that is beyond anything that you can just have by trying to just modify your habits, use your willpower to flourish. All of the other things are important. Now, I'm saying, this is me, not Paul. Obviously, sleep is important. It's great to know about the gut health. I'm curious about your reactions to the idea that we are spiritual beings, and that if we are not cultivating a relationship with that part of ourselves, or that spirit that lives within us, we are not getting the totality of what it really means to be alive.
Yeah, I'll take this one first, Sarah. It's a really interesting question, Philip. This is where we officially venture into the part where I'll take off the academic robes and just give you my take on this, because you're talking about things that are a little bit outside of what we typically can measure and experiment on. But I can tell you that I've experimented on this in my own life. And And I would say that I'm generally agnostic as to the type of teaching or religious practice in the background, as it sounds like you are to a certain extent. But I will say that I do believe very much that when we let go of ego and when we let go of sort of holding on to everything and trying to control everything, Sarah used the word surrender before. In moments like that, something does open up, right? This is, we're also crossing over into the experiences of people in psychedelic therapies, where there is where your default mode network does come crashing down, your ego goes away, and something else emerges there. And I think it's interesting. And there, I would say in my own experience, there is a there, and it really is a place where you can find this connection to something larger than yourself. Call it love, call it whatever you want to call it. But I do think it's a really interesting conversation. I think we're at a really exciting forefront where we may be able to see some of the science behind this too. But even short of that, I don't want to lose sight of it as an important concept to continue to explore philosophically, even.
Thank you for that, Chris. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm going to think about what you said as I eat my kimchi, which I'm going to run out.
For the record, I don't love kimchi. I just put the picture up there, but I applaud you for doing it. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I guess I would echo your sentiment, and I would say that after all these years, I really have just even stopped being like precious about how anybody gets there. I feel like I kind of divorced myself from outcomes of like, well, what are the outcome, right? And I just stay in the process. So it's any portal in, and people find their way, and they put together meaning and anchors and roots if you give them space at different times in their life in different ways. So I think if that involves for you a deep relationship or any type of relationship with something spiritual, I think it's awesome. Yeah,
awesome.
Like it's awesome. Can only enhance things.
Thank you so much, Philip. Right, we're 7 minutes past the hour. I should do one more question. Is that all right? I'm not going to get to all the questions here, guys. I'm sorry. If I don't, there's a bunch in the chat as well. I will save the chat file after this and circulate to the whole network, so Sarah and Chris can see it. If I don't get your question, please put it in the chat now. I'm just going to have to go in the order they appear on my screen. The next person is Nakish. So Nakish Dewan, the floor is yours.
Yes, hi there. Question is, you started with saying you've started to incorporate this construct of flourishing in your practice with individuals recently. And I'm just wondering, as a professional, have you seen your relationship with your clients change? What impact has this made? Because I'm a former sports psychiatrist. I've worked with world-class athletes. I've worked with executives. So how has this changed what you do on a day-to-day basis? And have you noticed a difference?
Is that for me or for Chris or for both of us?
Both of you.
Okay. My answer is pretty easy, or pretty straightforward. So I don't know that I would say I focused on flourishing per se, but I changed the way that I approached the relationship inside of coaching, both with individuals and with teams. And I would say it was about 10 years ago and happened over a stretch of time. And I would say at a fundamental level, it changed nothing. And then at a attentional level, it changed a lot, because I started changing sort of what I listened for, what I highlighted, what I amplified inside the dynamic. It changed how I listened. It changed the way that I metabolized what I was listening to. So I would say, fundamentally in the day in and the day out exchange, I don't know that my clients would say to you like, hey, yeah, I can really pinpoint when Sarah like dug in. But I would say over time, it changed also everything about me.
Yeah, it definitely had an impact on my coaching career and in my academic career. But as it pertains to the bit about coaching with people, let's go with athletes for now, but the crossover should be pretty apparent. When as a skeptical scientist, the concept of flow and
One of my favorite
flourishing,
features of you is your skepticism. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really hard to get my my skepticism over the hump. And then once, you start putting, freestyle rappers into fMRI and watching the changes happen in their brain and seeing the mechanisms that show up beneath the hood when these states of consciousness start to show up, that was what got me there. And partly because there's action steps that can follow that, because when you see these mechanisms come online and sometimes go offline, it started this really interesting conversation about how you could trigger these mechanisms in other ways. So then there's real steps and there's real things you can do to sort of prime the pump for these, more, perhaps sought after states of consciousness. So it really had an impact on me. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Naki, for your question. And thank you so much, Chris and Sarah, for answering all those questions and sticking around beyond the time that we advertised this call. Right, everyone, we are 10 minutes past the hour. Can you please all, I'm just going to create this as a full gallery view here, if I can somehow. How do I remove that? There we go. Full gallery view here. Okay, if we could all please give a round of applause to our speakers today, Dr. Chris Bertram and Dr. Sarah Sarkis, for an amazing session. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Love that. That was completely different to any session we've had before, this live conversation. I didn't realize you guys literally were like on the fly, not sharing each other, slides with each other beforehand, but really making this spontaneous. I love that about it.
I love that you didn't know what you were saying yes to, and you said it anyway. So
well,
thank you.
I knew this would be fantastic, whatever. Thank you so much for joining us today. You can see the enthusiasm here, guys, since, so many members have stayed on beyond the end of the call. I will circulate the chat and the recording to all of you via the email. Afterwards, a reminder to all you, we meet on the last Tuesday of every month between 3 and 4 p.m. ET or 8 and 9 p.m. GMT. Our next meeting will be in 4 weeks' time at the end of March. You'll get info about that soon. Have a great week. Flourish well. And we'll see you soon.
Save the chat? Is there a way to save the chat?
I'll send you the chat. Don't worry. It's all good. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Great job, folks. Great job.
Thank you.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Congratulations. Thank you, John.
Thank you.